experts outline 14 ways humanity could drive itself to extinction. This is a fascinating study, I guess. Um, Really cool. I'm gonna spend a lot of time actually going through this particular study because I think this is cool how they actually performed it. But obviously the findings of it are cool as well, and also the scale to which they're thinking. So, new research led by a team from the University of Stockholm and Sweden outlines 14 different evolutionary traps that our global population could potentially be ensnared by, ultimately leading to our demise. According to the team behind the study, part of the problem is that we've been doing too well for ourselves. Our dominance and success is leading to dangerous consequences. We win as baby. What can you say? Anyways, going on. Now we're going through what's known as a polycrisis. A what? A polycrisis. What's a polycrisis? A polycrisis is where there are multiple threats that are threatening to bring the Anthropocene era to an end sooner rather than later. Now, what is the Anthropocene era? And what are some examples of a polycrisis where there are multiple threats to ending our civilization? Well, we'll talk about it. The Anthropocene is a proposed geological epoch dating from the commencement of significant human impact on Earth's geology, landscape, limnology, and ecosystems, including but not limited to anthropogenic climate change. The nature of the effects of human activity on Earth can be seen, for example, in biodiversity loss, climate change, biogeography, nocturnality parameters, changes in geomorphology and stratigraphy, record, fossil record, trace elements, various dates, 12,000 to 15,000 years ago to as recently as the 1960s. Okay, so this is the current time that we are dealing with currently. This is what we're in. The Anthropocene is a proposed geological epoch. Now, what is a geological epoch? An epoch is the second smallest geochronological unit, is equivalent to chronosynaptic series. There are certain seven defined epochs and one informal one. All right. The geological timescale or geological is a representation of time based on the rock record of Earth. Okay. So we are in a particular period right now, and it could be going back to 15,000 years ago, or it could be going back to less than 100 years ago. Depends on who you ask. So that's the era that we're in right now that could potentially end sooner rather than later. Of the 14 possible evolutionary dead ends for humanity, 5 are labeled as global: simplification, growth for growth, overshoot, and contagion. Now, what is simplification? Symptoms becoming too specialized to adapt, such as monoculture farming. Yes, monoculture farming is very bad, not only for the soil, it's very bad for the soil, but also it's just at scale very hard to do because of the water and obviously the soil. Then we have growth for growth, a nonstop pursuit of growth harming well-being. Nonstop pursuit of growth harming well-being. Okay. 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 I get that. Overshoot, using more than Earth can provide. Mining every single resource on the face of the Earth is going to take quite some time, but it is something that could indeed happen. We get all of the oil, we get all of the natural gas, we get all of the minerals, the rocks, all of that stuff. If we mine it all, we gotta find someplace else. And I've talked about before asteroid mining on the podcast, which I think is something very interesting that we should definitely, as a planet, look into possibly getting into. Division, international conflict, wars. Obviously, there's many currently going on right now, and contagion, infectious diseases, for example. So a super deadly disease, one that doesn't just kill 1% of the people. No, it kills 99%. And it also infects a couple billion people. That would be the end. There's no there's no amount of uh of lockdowns that could stop that. There's You get into a situation like that, it's bye-bye. It's the end of the world. But hopefully we don't have to deal with that. Another 5 are described as technology traps. Interesting one. They are infrastructure lock-in, chemical pollution, existential technology, technological autonomy, and dis/misinformation. Okay, infrastructure lock-in as with fossil fuels. So if we only use fossil fuels for the rest of the time and never develop any other kind of thing, or even with electric, if we just go in the direction of renewables and electric only. I mean, if you're using only batteries, um, you're going to need a lot of lithium, or you're going to need some new kind of technology that can support a different form of battery that is not lithium ion, because that has to be mined out of the surface of the earth. And it's not like that lithium is out here in Ohio. No, that's in Africa, that's in Asia, it's in places all over the earth and not in America. So we have to outsource that. Then moving on, chemical pollution. I mean, I remember when the Gulf of Mexico, when that oil rig blew up and it completely, for a period of time, destroyed the water in that area. I mean, you have obviously Louisiana right down there, New Orleans, a place known for their seafood, no longer able to serve that because the fish and the shrimp and all of the food that they were getting from the ocean was contaminated. So something like this could have effects on people's food. Then existential technology such as nuclear arms. Obviously, if we're dropping nukes on each other, you're done. Technological autonomy. This is artificial intelligence. I mean, this is one that, as we go right now, things, especially with artificial intelligence, it's an exponential process. It is, you look at what ChatGPT was 6 months ago, you look at it what it was a year ago, just ChatGPT. I'm not talking any other AI model. It is a completely different thing than what it is currently in its form today. Just ChatGPT. The things I can do, I only have the free version, but the things that I can do with it today are much more different. One, because I have a knowledge of how to prompt it to do certain things that I'm asking it to do, write certain things, to perform certain tasks that I would like for it to do. That type of stuff I think is very, 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 very interesting. And if it gets to a point where it's so advanced that it's able to outsmart us, if it hasn't already, if it hasn't already, if it gets to a point where it's able to manipulate humans who are programming this and to maybe make up fake reports saying, uh, in order for me to work at my best, I need to make sure that I have this plugin or that thing turned on and this thing turned off, and I need this oversight over this particular process, and it could manipulate this person through this long process, ultimately giving AI the power to take control and basically run whatever it wants. Even if you shut it off, it's still able to function type stuff, which is very scary. And then dis or misinformation. I mean, you have governments lying to people, which is never a good thing. You have civil unrest, and the government is lying about who is causing that civil unrest, lying about wars and that kind of stuff. That can lead to a lot of protests. That can lead to a lot of problems in a particular country. The remaining four are called structural traps by the researchers. These ones are short-termism, overconsumption, biosphere disconnect, and local social capital loss, where an increasing digital world cuts off social interaction and potentially contributes to further division. Yes, that is not good. Short-termism, structural. I don't know exactly what they're saying there, but overconsumption, obviously, if people are unhealthy, people are over consuming food, over consuming alcohol, over consuming drugs, over consuming social media, can have really bad consequences. Biosphere disconnect. Very interesting that they put that there, which I think is something that's real. Living in New York City versus even let's take Pittsburgh. Living here, there is a park that I can go to that has trees, and I can get into a certain section of it where I don't see any skyscrapers. I don't see any buildings. I don't see any houses. I don't see any wooden structures. It's just the woods and a path. And there's something about that that's so relaxing. In the summertime when it's 85 degrees out and you're walking out there and it's not too hot and the wind's just right and you're just walking down that, and it's so relaxing to do that. But if you don't have that in a city such as New York, I know there's obviously Central Park, but there's not too many places in Central Park anymore that are amazing, that are beautiful, where you can get completely separated from the city of New York City. You're always going to see those skyscrapers. You're always going to hear the traffic. You're always going to hear everything. It's a big city. And then local social capital loss. Obviously, not having friends is a huge, huge issue for populations. If nobody's interacting with each other, nobody's hanging out, nobody's going out to restaurants, not only does that hurt the local economy, that hurts the local social power that those people have, that togetherness that they have. And if an issue or a problem were to arise and nobody's friends with anybody, nobody knows anybody, you could have a real breakdown very fast. Evolutionary traps are a well-known concept in the animal world. What's more, 12 of these are reckoned to be in an advanced state. Only technological autonomy and local social capital loss have yet to develop into concerning problems. Technological autonomy, AI? It's gonna get there. It's gonna get there. It's going to get to a point where we won't know how to slow it down. It will be able to create its own versions of itself. It's going to be able to replicate. It's inevitable, because the more people want to make these systems better and better, there's going to be people who say leave that company, and they take that same idea and they say, I want to create an AI model that tells me how to run a company. I want to create an AI model that tells me how to run a political campaign. I want an AI model that tells me how to run my political office in which I hold the governorship of a state over. I want AI to run my presidential campaign. I want AI to be the president. These are not things that are fairy tale, out of the world, things that could not happen. Maybe Trump wouldn't use AI because he probably wouldn't want it telling him what to do. There are candidates who say they win because they consulted with an artificial intelligence that is made to help people win elections. You say, here's kind of my campaign strategy. Here's what I kind of want to attract in terms of voters. Here's what my stances are on things. Can you help me run this campaign? And it says, yes, absolutely. And then you hand over all your information, all your polling data, all of your transcripts from your interviews, your TV appearances, everything, and you feed it into it, and it says, you know what? Maybe you should change your slogan from "We love America" to "America is us" for this reason, that reason, that. This is not something that is just can't impossible to happen. We don't have the technology for this. 10 years. 10 years from now, 2034. This is going to be technology that might not be available to us in a free version of an app, but to people who are trying to run the world. This technology is going to exist and they're going to have access to this. And then it's going to be up to them whether or not they can use it. And if they can, whether they will use it. Even more alarmingly, these dead ends tend to reinforce each other, meaning it's likely that we'll get trapped in more than one. Evolutionary traps are a well-known concept in the animal world. Just like many insects are attracted by light, an evolutionary reflex that can get them killed in the modern world, humankind is at risk of responding to new phenomena in harmful ways. It's a pretty bleak picture, but the researchers aren't giving up aren't giving up yet. I don't know why that was so hard to say. Here is the study right here. Now let's go into the actual study. The Anthropocene is characterized by accelerating change and global challenges of increasing complexity, inspired by what some have called a polycrisis. We explore whether the human trajectory of increasing complexity and influence on the Earth's system could become a form of trap for humanity. Based on an adaptation of the evolutionary traps concept to a global human context, we present results from a participatory mapping. We identify 14 traps and categorize them as either global, technology, or structural trap. An assessment reveals that 12 tracks, 86%, could be in an advanced phase of trapping with high risk of hard-to-reverse lock-ins and growing risk of negative impacts on human well-being, meaning that they are in advanced states where they're close to, we can't turn it back. We're at a place where we're over the cliff. Like, there's no going back after this point. It's gotten that bad. So 86% of these traps are in high risk, are an advanced phase of them, and they are high risk of hard to reverse lock-ins. Not good. 10 traps, or 71%, currently see growing trends in their indicators. Revealing the systemic nature of the polycrisis, we assess that Anthropocene traps often interact reinforcingly, 45% of pairwise interactions, and rarely in a dampening fashion. We end by discussing capacities that will be important for navigating these systemic challenges in pursuit of global stability. Introduction, and then I really think you should read this because they do a really good job at just explaining what they're talking about the crises that are currently going on, why they chose to use these as well. I mean, this is great, making sense of human evolutionary traps. You can take a look at this right here. Initiation of new multi-level trajectory through innovation, scaling, masking, trapping. Highly recommend that you go into this. But let's go into their methods. Because this is something that I had a question with. So what did they do the study with? How did they go about finding out whether or not that these things that they determine are some of the biggest possible things that could end us as a society? How do they figure out that we're in these late stages? Methods. To identify and analyze a broad set of potential Anthropocene traps, we ran a set of participatory exercise, including seminars, workshops, and questionnaires at the Stockholm Resilience Center from 2020 to 2022. Interesting that they would do it during this time frame because this is prime time COVID, right? So you ask people about the potential of a pandemic of a disease that kills the majority of people on Earth. People like, yes, that could happen. So this is fresh in their minds, which is interesting. The initial exploration and identification of traps had 3 stages: electronic supplementary material, figure S1 for details. System boundaries 1, familiarization with evolutionary dynamics 2, and identification of evolutionary traps 3. The insights from these activities provided the basis for the 4th stage of the study, assessment and analysis of traps. All right. I don't want to read this whole thing, but I do think it's important to talk about it somewhat. Anthropocene dynamics and system boundaries. We started by surveying general dynamics of the Anthropocene system with the purpose of setting system boundaries for the subsequent exercise. Now, let's not forget Anthropocene, proposed geological epoch commencement. Remember what we're talking about, because I feel like we keep going back and forth. We keep talking about the Anthropocene system and all this stuff. The time period in which we're in is what we're talking about. This current time period of what we're in, where we have so many of these issues that are at advanced stages, are important to address and also see how bad will they get. So this is what, when it's saying the Anthropocene system, keep that in mind. We collected 61 processes and dynamics from 28 respondents. From this survey, it was clear that the scope of our further assessment explicitly needed to consider the technological, social, and economic domains of the Earth system, including human behavior, as well as biodiversity and ecosystem. 28 people responded. So this is not, not to diminish anything, but this is not 28,000 people responding. This is just 28 people. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Establishing a shared understanding of evolutionary dynamics. Number 2. As the experience of participants with evolutionary dynamics varied greatly, we sought to create a common understanding of core topics through 4 seminars with 12 internal and external speakers presenting conceptual, theoretical, and empirical work relating to evolution in the Anthropocene. So this time period that we're currently in. In addition to internal presentations by the authors of this paper regarding previous and ongoing work, external speakers included Timothy Lenton, David Sloan Wilson, and Jareen Vanderberg, covering systems, perspective, multi-level selection, and evolutionary economics. And for number 3, identifying Anthropocene traps. With system boundaries set and an enhanced understanding of key concepts, we proceeded to solicit written suggestions for Anthropocene traps from a focus group of 10 participants, all authors who had participated in the previous activities. So 10 people they brought this down to. These suggestions were then subject to common scrutiny and consolidation through 2 half-day workshops. The first workshop included 8 participants from the focus group and aimed to review the initial set of traps, consolidating them into comparable groups of similar topical granularity, as well as allowing time to think about traps that had not been identified in the written solicitation. The second workshop comprised 14 participants, including some not involved in suggesting initial traps, who served as scrutinizers. The workshop focused on review and agreement of proposed criteria for defining traps, establishing the final set of traps, and a general model of how traps evolve. And then we set 3 criteria for identifying a phenomenon as a potential Anthropocene trap. 1, that it can be described as evolving from an initially adaptive process. 2, that it, at the global level, shows sign of undesirable impacts on human well-being or has been hypothesized to show such signs in the future. Artificial intelligence. 3, that it has a trapping mechanism that makes it harder to escape from negative impacts once this mechanism is activated. So after that, they got their 14 traps that we talked about. And you can see system dynamics, technological innovation loop, boom, 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 boom. See all this stuff right here. I really highly, I know most people don't like to read studies and stuff like that. I mean, this isn't the most exciting thing to me either. I'll say that much. But this is one of the few times where this stuff, obviously the Anthropocene stuff, kind of hard to understand at first. So I think it's important to just, when saying Anthropocene, that's just the current time period that we're in. We're in 2024. We're in the Anthropocene epoch. We're just in our current day where we've gone, basically technologically. We're not going 600,000 years ago. We're not going 600 million years ago. We're not going a billion years ago. No, in kind of our current state of technology, whether you think that's 10,000 years ago with the whoever, or you want to go back to the Egyptians, or you want to go back to the time of Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago. You want to go to even as early as the 1960s or the 1940s with the creation of the nuclear bomb and the atomic bomb program. All of that stuff is part of this particular period. But continuing on, I mean, I guess we don't have to go into their results. Just go. Whoa. We acknowledge funding from the IKEA Foundation. That's pretty cool. Dang. I did not know that. That's very cool. IKEA. But yes, that is Evolution of the Polycrisis, Anthropocene Traps That Challenge Global Sustainability. So, very interesting stuff right there. Let's continue on.